Hello, everybody. Welcome to session 7 of our Relationships Masterclass. And this session is about family dynamics. And there's a reason why we're doing family dynamics after intimate relationships, because you will see a lot of the correlation between intimate relationships and family now that you understand a little better of what intimacy is and all the different components. So on that note, let's start with our reflection questions from session 6. And so the first two questions are the same. What did I learn about myself? And what questions do I have? Get used to asking these things. These are ways to continue the exploration of knowing yourself, becoming more self-aware. And at the end of this, as much as I continue to dive into all these topics and everything that I've taught you in this class and other classes, if you take them with me, is becoming more self-aware and becoming more connected to you. Because of so many things we're going to talk about here in this family dynamics class and things we've talked about in other courses, so many of us are disconnected from ourselves for a lot of the reasons that I've spoke about already in this class. And so there's a reason why I keep doing this every week with you. What did I learn about myself? What questions do I have? So important to take the time to just stop and reflect. And so hopefully these classes are, if nothing else, doing that for you, becoming more aware. All right? So take that time, pause the video if you need to. What did I learn about myself? What questions do I have? And in the space of intimacy, and that now that last session was on intimacy, after being more aware of relationships and doing some of the practices from last week, what types of intimacy do I see as strong aspects in some of my relationships? So when we looked at those aspects of intimacy, what are the types or aspects of intimacy that you see are very strong in your life right now? Maybe it's the experiential, maybe it's the intellectual, right? Maybe there's the emotional. You see where those types of intimate connections are strong, right? So just acknowledge where you see the strongest intimate connections and the types. Maybe there's a dominance of intimacy type relationships. Great. Acknowledge them, recognize them, become aware of them. All right. And then on the other side, what types of intimacy have I realized I could put more focus on? Right? Maybe I'm really not focusing on creating that experiential intimacy or that intellectual intimacy, right? Or spiritual intimacy. Maybe that's the piece that I'd like to cultivate more. Right? Maybe I'm noticing that in some of my romantic relationships, I'm using sexual intimacy to make up for some of those other spaces that I'm not nurturing. Right? So just make a note of the relationships in your life, the ones that would fall into the category of intimate relationships, your deeper connected relationships, and just acknowledge, wow, what makes this relationship intimate? What holes do I see in this space? Like, just take note. Hopefully after last week's session and doing some reflection on this and going through those questions of reflection in our last session, summarize what you've learned, right? Become more self-aware so you can start to take the steps to create more deep connections in your relationships. Next one, what are the things I need to be mindful of when engaging in intimate or romantic relationships? So if you are in a romantic relationship or you're trying to create romantic relationships, a partner, what do I need to be mindful of here, right? Do I have a tendency to skip steps? Do I create fantasies about what happens when representatives are getting along? Am I quick to fall in love and think that this person is the greatest thing ever and create these kind of childlike fantasies? Do I need to be mindful of that? And what are some things that I can do to make sure that I don't invest in a fantasy? And maybe in the past, I have invested in fantastical ideas of relationships, and I'm in a space of people constantly letting me down. Well, that could be an indication of, man, I've definitely skipped some steps here. I've let the representatives create something that's not actually, that I haven't confirmed is there. Okay, so just if you're in an intimate relationship or you're looking to create one, just take note. If you're in one, what are the things I need to be mindful of? Oh, I can see how I use sexual intimacy to make up for these other things. Okay, just take note of that. All right. And so, again, if you need to pause to kind of reflect on these, go ahead. But what we're going to do now is we're going to kind of take this idea of intimacy and we're going to talk about family dynamics. And there's two parts to family dynamics that I'm going to focus on here. And the first part is what I'm going to call your first family. Your first family are your parents and your siblings. Okay, it's the family you grew up in. Okay, so we all have this one. Whether these people are still, they're all still with us, they're all still alive. We've had this experience of our first family. So we're going to talk about family dynamics with parents and siblings. All right. And so why this can be the most rewarding and the most painful, right? Like being with our first family can be really just this incredible experience at times, right? It can be hopeful. Like there's this whole idea of how it could be amazing, right? Like maybe that's there for us at times, or maybe it's just complete dread. It's painful, but usually it's one or the other. Like there's extremes in this space when it comes to our first family. Okay. And a lot of times it's a mixture of both. So why is that? The reason why is because it's where we're most vulnerable to our primary needs, right? So if you remember back from earlier sessions, where did the cognitive unconscious form in the old brain, where we got that deep programming of safety and connection and belonging and all that stuff, is the old brain. And who trained that, who taught us that, was our first family. It basically programmed our old brain as to what we can expect and how to navigate that space, right? And so what happens is our family, that first family, creates and programs our old brain. And what does that lead to? This is how we define love, acceptance, and safety. So our definition of love, acceptance, and safety was programmed by our family. Okay? And depending on what that experience was like, we might have had to create different versions of ourselves to be loved, accepted, and safe. It's where our strongest ties are. So when you talk about hardwired connection that touches us at the core of who we are, or the person we believe we need to be in order to be loved and accepted, it all has to do with our first family. That's where it begins. And that's where we have to begin. We have to understand. So I hope at this point, after going through this stuff at the beginning of our course here, you start to understand why this place can be like an open wound for some of us, or can be like this incredible experience, because it really touches on who we identify ourselves at our core, right? It's our identity. This is where our identity was created, is to the point of, hey, who I am is okay, or no, I need to be this other version in order to be okay, right? What does okay mean? It means safe. Okay, so am I okay as who I am? Or do I have to create this other version of me to be okay, to be safe, to be accepted, to be loved? So much intensity of emotion here. And when these versions of ourselves are driving, it can be a little bit of a roller coaster. So how do we combat this when we're engaging with family number one? We need to be aware. Again, it comes back to self-awareness. It comes back to understanding ourselves. What version of me dominates the relationships with my number one family, with my first family? Which version do I feel like I can really be myself in this space? Some people feel like that's one of the places they can be themselves is with their families, right? That's fine. Or, man, I really feel like when I'm back with my family, I feel like I have to be this other version of me. I feel insecure. I feel like I have to show that I'm valuable. I have to be different. I have to be unique. I have to have it together. I don't know. That can definitely be a thing that shows up. I know some of those things definitely show up for me when I engage with a family. I feel like I have to be this version of me. I have to portray someone who's, got it together, and I don't know. That's something that I become aware of. That when I'm there, I have to show up as, hey, I'm valuable here. Prove my value, right? As I've shared in other classes, there's 5 kids. So just a byproduct of that is we're all in competition for that love and acceptance, just because there's only 2 parents, and in a traditional model, one's working. And so there's one parent that has to meet the insatiable needs of all 5 of these kids, as an example. And you've heard me say this before, but it's not even possible for one parent, let alone 2 parents, to meet the insatiable needs of all their children. It's not possible. This is why, 99% of human existence, we engage in small hunter-gatherer groups. Okay. It's only in the last couple hundred years that we have these isolated nuclear families, everybody operating in their own little bubbles and trying to survive on their own. There's no more community. There's no more collective raising our youth. So it really puts us in a tricky situation. We're more in survival mode, which is why so many parents don't have the capacity, because they grew up in that environment, and their kids have to adapt to that, and on and on and on and go. So we're going to talk a little bit about that here today, but I hope you're getting the idea here. And so as far as us engaging with our first family, we want to be aware, okay? Because here's the reality of whatever version of you that dominates this is going to be the safest to show up as whatever this version is. So you're going to feel the safest showing up as this version, okay? Because it's the thing that allowed you to survive as a kid. So remember, you created this because it meant survival. It meant that as a kid, if I didn't show up as this, I wasn't going to make it. Don't forget that, right? Making sure the environment accepts us as a child is more important than being our authentic self, okay? So important to remember that. So I'm going to feel the safest from a survival standpoint when I engage with my first family as this version of me. Now, disclaimer, being the safest doesn't mean it's necessarily enjoyable, okay? I might go right back to this version of myself of being, super quiet, not talking, and I don't say anything, or I have to be the center of attention. And maybe you feel like, oh my God, I just can't believe I hate being around my family because I feel like I turn into this X, Y, or Z, right? Like people sometimes think that, or God, I just feel like I have to take care of everybody when I'm with my family. Oh my God, I've been thinking about my first family. I just feel like this huge burden. Yeah, because you had to create a version of yourself that put all your needs aside and made everybody else's needs more important. But that's where you're going to feel the safest, usually, especially if you're not aware of this. Okay, so take a second, see if you can identify what version of you dominates in that space. Do you as a child, do you turn into the parent? Are you the one taking care of everybody, right? And you always have been, and your parent has always treated you as a peer, not as a child, right? We're going to talk a little bit about that too. But what version of you? Okay, and so when we become aware of these things, we put ourselves in a position where we can create some connection with our first family, and I'll just say in a healthy way, okay? Because being aware that I have this aspect of me that tends to show up in this space with first family, it allows me to take a step back and position myself to engage with them in a different way, okay? And that's really step one, is position your mindset. So when you're engaging with your first family, you have to position your mindset. You have to directly, you have to direct your mind to create a framework and a context to operate from. So this is what would be called a top-down approach. I'm going to talk about some bottom-up approaches here. It's actually going to be our complete focus for the week, is more of bottom-up approaches. But position your mindset by being mindful of the version of yourself that you get that may get activated. So if I'm going to go into the space with my first family, I say, okay, I got to be mindful that my default cognitive unconscious, the fast, quick thing that's going to happen is I'm going to go right into this space. And I'm going to show up as this person that has to show that they are valuable and that they've got it together. And, because if I show that I've accomplished X, Y, and Z, then I'll get the attention, right? As an example, right? So be mindful of that version. You got to be aware of it, because if you're not aware of it, then it's just going to take over. Okay. And you're going to be with your family and it's going to be like you're 5 years old again, right? So common. So we want to position our mindset. 2, this is so important. Remind yourself that you're an adult. I know that sounds silly, right? But you got to remember, when that version of you shows up, it's engaging in the space as if you were a kid. And that I have to get this environment to accept me. I've got to get them to approve of me. I've got to get them to be happy with me. I've got to get them to, I don't want to see mom upset. I don't want to see dad upset. I don't want to, the child will take over. So you got to be aware that you're an adult, and you don't need anything from them anymore, meaning you don't need them to accept you. And I know that's tough to hear when the adapted version of yourself is turned on. Hey, I don't need anything from these people anymore, meaning my life is no longer dependent on them. I can survive with them accepting me or not. Okay, it's not the same situation. I'm an adult. Okay, now I'm emphasizing the word need here, okay, because children need the environment to accept them. Adults don't. And I know this is a process, guys. So I'm not just saying you just flip a switch and all of a sudden like, oh, I'm good. But it's something you want to be mindful. You want to position a mindset. Okay? Excuse me. And then you want to align yourself and the relationship with what is ultimately most important to you and your aim. So this goes back to the relationship formula. I want to remind myself, and I want to be aware of the context I want to create here with my family, based on what's most important to me. So how am I going to show up here with my family in a way that aligns with what's most important to me? Now I'm living for myself. And this is very important, especially if you're adapted self that you created as a child. Put your parents' and family's needs ahead of yours, right? So now you're living for them. You're living for a parent. You're living for your family. Different scenario. So we have to go in there and say, hey, I'm going to align myself and the relationship with what's ultimately most important to me and my aim. And that goes back to that relationship formula. We got to understand what's most important to me here. And so when I engage with my family based on my aim of just showing compassion, like the person I want to be in the world and what I want to create is better understanding and more compassion for myself and others. And so as an adult, I can go into this space with my family, understand that they've all, navigating their own traumas and situations that they're dealing with. And I can be in a place of understanding, and I can be in a place of compassion, right? I can engage in conversations with these people from a place of understanding. Right? I don't have to prove anything to them. I don't have to prove my worthiness to them. I don't have to justify what I'm doing anymore. I can accept that they agree or disagree, and I can understand that that's where they're coming from, and I can have compassion for any pain they have, regardless if they're pointing it in my direction or not, or blaming me for it. Hey, I hear you, but one common one is like if a parent is upset that you're not spending, the holidays with them. Right? That could be one. So they could even leverage siblings to like make you feel guilty that you're not coming home, and that triangulate the guilt, right? Say, hey, call your sister, call your brother to find out why they're not coming home, And then brother or sister called and say, hey, why aren't you coming home? Mom and dad are really upset, or mom's really upset you're not coming. It's like, okay, let me pour guilt on you here. It's like, yeah, I've decided what's important to me is I want to spend time with a friend of mine and we're going to take a trip. Right? It's like you have every right to do that. And the fact that someone's upset about it, that's them managing their own traumas, their own emotions that they have not yet are not self-aware enough to do it to do their own self-regulating, as an example, right? And so there's obviously this can get very dynamic, but you want to have your context, because if you don't have a context, you don't have, hey, who do I want to be here? What's most important to me, and how do I want to show up in these relationships with my first family that align me with that person that I want to be? And whatever that is fine, but do it for you. Don't do it because you feel obligated to do it. It's your choice, right? And so you have to have a game plan. You have to have a game plan when you go into this space, because if you don't, you're going to just go right back into those other the adapted cells are going to take over, and it happens very fast. So what's the game plan? Acknowledge and recognize how they are capable of connecting with you. Focus here. So if I go into the space and say, all right, I understand that this is how they show love for me. They try to control me. They try to get me. They tell me that this is good and this is bad. They tell me that, hey, I don't think you should do that. I don't think you should do this. It's like, hey, I get that they're doing this because this is the only way they know how to show care. Now, it's not helpful. It actually has always sucked when they're constantly judging everything I do. But I'm going to just acknowledge and see that that's them supporting me. And so maybe what I'll say is, thank you for your thoughts. I know you're telling me that because you care about me, right? That's the going into the conversation from a place of understanding, not from a place of I have to defend myself against everybody in here who's going to have an opinion about what I'm doing, right? And that kind of brings us to the next place, right? Be clear on what you will and will not tolerate, right? And that doesn't mean that you have to tolerate everything. You can say, hey, I understand you're saying that, but like, listen, if I'm going to be here and you're just going to kind of rip me apart and tell me why you're not happy with the life that I've chosen to live, I'm going to leave, because I don't need to sit here and hear this all day. And that's fine to do, and you can leave. It's fine, right? And they can be upset, and they can be this. This is a key sign that you're on track. Is when you stand for yourself, you feel guilty. That's a good sign, okay? It's a good sign that when you stand for yourself with your first family, when you feel guilty, you're probably on track. And the reason why I say that is because the other option is resentment and burden. Because if you're doing something to please somebody else, okay, the result of that is usually resentment and anger. Okay, because you feel like you have to do it because you don't want them to be upset. You don't want to upset them. You don't want them to be, sad. You don't want to ruin their day, their holiday. And so you do it. So you feel obligated, and then you resent them, and then you're pissed. Okay, that's option one. Option two is learn to stand for yourself and make your needs more important. Okay, especially if traditionally your adapted self never does. And so your adapted self was driven by the fact that survival is key, right? And so they did whatever they had to do to make everybody happy. Well, if you feel guilty that they're sad and you're blaming yourself for them, that's a good sign, okay? It's a good sign that you're standing for yourself. And so it's okay to feel the guilt. Acknowledge that this is a sign that I'm on track, and that, hey, it's not my responsibility to make this person happy. Okay, it's not my responsibility. And it's my responsibility to live my life. It's not my responsibility to take care of them. Okay, again, adapted self, child version of ourself. We will do anything to make these people happy so they accept us. It's a very important distinction here. So understanding what you will and will not tolerate, and then also be clear on what you're willing to offer them and what you're not willing to offer them. Hey, I'm not willing to do X, but you can count on me for Y. Hey, so you can't live with me, but I'll definitely help you find a place to live, right? Like you can say that to siblings, you can say that to parents. Hey, I can't fund your lifestyle, but I can teach you how to manage your money so that you can do it for yourself. Hey, I'm not willing to give you money, but I'm willing to help you figure out a way where you can make money, right? Lots of options, but always be clear, okay, of what you're willing to do, offer them, and what you're not. Because again, this gives you the power of choice. This is where power comes in. Because as soon as you feel obligated to do something because they're family, resentment, anger comes in. It's almost immediate. Okay. So instead, just be like, hey, this is what I can do and this is what I'm not willing to do. Okay. And so these are just some good guidelines to engaging with first family. You got to be mindful of what version of yourself, that adaptive version of yourself, can sneak in and create a different context to operate inside of, which has everything to do with your aim. Okay. Remind yourself you're not a kid anymore. Like you get to live your life, and then have a game plan, right? A lot of this is the relationship formula. Okay. A lot of this is the relationship formula that we went over a couple sessions ago. So you can apply all the relationship formula to every relationship, including this one. Okay. So that's family number one, first family.